Looking at that whole picture in terms of, the whole and all the different components, part of it, what percentage or what are the emphasis on genetics, nutrition, environment, learning, behavior? What part do all those play?
So when we look in terms of happiness specifically, there's sort of three big players at the table. So genetics is a huge player, absolutely. And a lot of happiness research actually comes from looking at twin studies. So what researchers did was they found monozygotic twins, so identical twins that were separated at birth. And so from that research, you can start to tease out a little bit of genetics versus environment. But again, we're studying humans. So it's not like we can put people in a lab and watch them. So
variable.
But it can give us a good indication. And we do see absolutely that genetics do play a huge role. But it sort of provides a range. So you could be from, this one end to the other end. And then the other piece that comes in is our environment. And our environment plays a big role. And I think all of us living through the pandemic understand how environment or lack thereof can affect our mood and our mental health. And then the third piece, which is where a lot of my work focuses on right now, is our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. Because we can't change our genes. Maybe gene expression, we can influence a little bit, environment. But if we think about our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors, we live in our head every single day, right? And we control what we do for the most part. And so especially with children, this is a huge area of opportunity where, especially when they're young, establishing healthy habits can help set them up for success in adulthood.
You mentioned you can't change your genes. I'm in absolute belief and on the same page as that. You can perhaps manage genetic expression.
Correct.
Is there an argument to be made, though, that happiness is a muscle and the more you work it out, the better you are at it?
I often, especially when I'm talking to children, I sort of explain it like it's a habit. It is like a muscle. If you think about it, sort of like if you want to be strong, you can go to the gym and you can lift weights. And over time, if you do that consistently, you get stronger. And happiness is the same way, our mental health, right? Like sometimes I go to like one of those home design stores and I see that sign that says choose happy. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, right? We don't wake up in the morning and we choose our outfit and we choose happy. We actually have to work at it. But it's the same thing as physical activity or nutrition, right? If we want to be healthy and happy, we have to work at it. It doesn't just fall into our lap. And I think a lot of times, especially with the modern conveniences of the world that we live in, we think it should just happen. Sure. But it doesn't. It is a habit. It is a skill. And if we think about it like a muscle, the other thing is like people always say, I will be happy when, fill in the blank, right? I will be happy when I have X amount of dollars, when my kid does whatever it is. But the reality is happiness is not a destination, right? We don't arrive at it. And so I don't see happiness that way. I see happiness the same way that I see physical activity or nutrition. So what I mean by that is, say, for example, you had a green smoothie in the morning and you put all the supplements and all the superfoods, everything in it. No one would ever drink that smoothie and then be like, thank you, Jillian.
Terrible.
I've reached nutritional wellness, right? We would never say that because we understand that if we want to be healthy, we have to choose healthy food most of the time. Or no one would go into the gym and have like the best workout of their life and then leave the gym and text their friend or their partner and say, I just had the best workout of my life. I've reached fitness, right? We see those as a practice and as a habit. And that's how I also see happiness. It's something that we have to work at on a continual basis for our entire life.
Okay, but aren't some people more predisposed to being able to experience happiness? And actually, really, I'm coming back full circle to the genetic susceptibilities. So some of us maybe are a little more predisposed to having the happiness hormones readily available, where others are maybe a little more predisposed to being on the side of, introvert and maybe a little bit more reserved and depressed. I mean, this is the whole genetic side.
Yeah, absolutely. So, often I'll have someone ask me a question, like they know an Eeyore, from Winnie the Pooh, the Eeyore type character, right? They're like, the glass is half empty. And there absolutely is a huge genetic role. But I think the key piece is that the conversation does not end there. Right. And that we all do have some autonomy and some opportunity to influence it beyond there. We all have this range. And yes, some people genetically, myself, for example, my mom was going through boxes in the basement a little while ago. And she found my report cards from when I was a child. And I was reading like my kindergarten report card and it said, Jillian's a fairly happy child. And I would have to say like, I'm probably on the happier side genetically. But even that being said, my one regret, and it's not really a regret, but I wish I would have measured my happiness before I started studying happiness. Because I try all of the things that I read about in my research and I'm happier now, I would have to say, but I don't have the baseline to check that. But the other thing is, and I think this is an important piece of the conversation too, I didn't realize that when you talk about happiness all the time and you research happiness, people sometimes think you're happy all the time. And I'm not. I'm a happiness researcher. I'm not happy all the time. And it's because there's a lot of research. Sometimes in literature, it's referred to as like the dark side of happiness, where people that try to be happy all the time end up being less happy than other people. And I think this is an important piece of the conversation to include as well, is that can we be happier than we are right now? Absolutely. Can we be happy all of the time? Absolutely not. And I think that part of the conversation, it kind of goes back to childhood. Like I remember, like if a child's outside riding a bike and they fall and they scrape their knee and they cry, what do parents often do? Comfort, don't cry, it's okay. But it's like, if you fall and you scrape your knee and you're in pain, crying kind of makes sense. And so part of the conversation is opening up this dialogue about emotions, right? And about feeling emotions that match the experiences that we're going through. And so I think a lot of times we've been told to like not feel some of those more challenging emotions and just try to be happy all the time, but that's not the point. And paradoxically, it's when we start to, especially with children, tapping into teaching them how to identify what emotions they're feeling and why they're feeling them, that promotes healthy psychological functioning.
Okay. So what would you say, as a parent's role,
Yeah.
what would be the most important actions, thoughts, teaching that they could give their children to start them off on this pathway, to create that and establish
Setting the
that?
stage,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
from early
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
I get asked by parents all of the time, especially through my work when I was at Sick Kids, which is the largest children's hospital in Canada. The number one question I would get from a parent is, how do I help my child be happy? I want my child to be happy. And the reality is that we can't make anybody else be happy. We can't push happiness on someone. We can't force happiness. And as a parent, my answer is always, step number one is children don't listen to what parents say. They watch what they do.
Role model.
And so if you want your child to be happy, the best thing you can do is to model that behavior for yourself and to include that in part of the conversation. It's very similar to another question I get asked all the time. Is like, my children are on devices all of the time. And my first question is, well, how often are you on your device, right? And so it's really, especially in the family unit, it's creating habits that are conducive to doing that and to establishing those sort of behaviors, right?
No, leading by example.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so important because you can't force a child to be happy, but you can create conditions which make it more likely for your child to experience more moments of happiness. And that's the key piece.
And when
Well, no, I was just going to, I love all that. And I was just going to mention, you must have seen this, happy
Yes.
moments between children and their parents, a multi-method and multi-informant perspective. A lot of studies, of which I know this is your area of expertise.
Yeah, this is a brand new one. This is a good study.
meta-analysis.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to speak to it? Because I think research shows that positive family dimensions, such as communication, open emotional bonds, parental support, strongly predict happiness in children. And I think you said something so important a couple of minutes ago, which is, no one, genetically or otherwise, is meant to be happy all the time. I
Right.
think that's probably a DSM diagnosis of some sort I'm not
Correct,
familiar with,
yeah.
but it's an imbalance, and nor should we be sad all the time. There's got to be this happy medium. But we're not geared that way. It's probably not even survivalistic. But what this is talking about is, just to your point, it starts early. And our viewers, our listeners want to hear just what Dr. Murray was asking. How is this best established? And it sounds like what you're saying is it really starts with openness and communication and role modeling.
Absolutely. And, I talk to people all the time, and especially parents right now. When I ask parents, were you taught how to be happy in school? No one ever says yes, because that was never a part of the conversation for parents today growing up. Things are changing now, which I think is really exciting. But no wonder we're confused, because if we were never taught, as a parent who's trying to raise healthy children, if you were never taught how to be happy, and then you add in media, social media, marketing, TV, movies that sort of project this image of what happiness is, which is
Social
incorrect.
media.
Absolutely. Social media is a big one. It's like, no wonder we're confused, because we don't even understand what it is that we're promoting, right? And I think that when we look at the family unit, there's such an opportunity to have conversations with children, talk about their feelings. Why are things going on? You know, especially at the dinner table, right? It's this great place if you can eat family dinner together, which research shows is something that can be a very powerful thing to increase communication with children, to learn about what they're doing. Because especially, you know, a lot of kids want to just go home and put on the TV or play video games, but having that communication with family is something that is absolutely
And it's
critical.
missing from this day and age. I know in your
Yeah.
clinical practice, Dr. Murray, you face, parents with dilemmas all the time in their children's screen time, and it's just overwhelming. And then, I'm sure you're guiding them out of that as often as possible. But what are some of the detriments of, early child? We're talking as early as maybe 2 years, like just shut up and watch. And then what they end up watching is detrimental to their happiness psychology, right?
So ultimately, what's happening with these last few generations, it's an experiment ongoing.
Right.
Nobody actually knows the full impact, the full consequences of all of this. All we can do is go back to our original way of being
Right.
and live that way as much as possible in today's environment.